Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Dalit is not moderating today?
No, she's not. She probably will join us, but she asked me to do it, so I'll try my best.
Okay, I'm sure you will do very well.
Well, there's already something that I cannot run, which is the online YouTube recording. There's an authorization I don't have, so. But it's recorded on the Zoom, so that can be then
Uploaded, yes. Yeah.
טקסט. היי.
Yes.
לא נסעת למונגוליה.
I will go to Mongolia after Shamatha retreat, and I will be going on the 26th of August. Yeah, I'm not going for the Kalachakra initiation. I'm going for subsequent teachings. I thought we spoke about it, no? שלום עמליה זין ראשונה.
הפכתי להיות עמליה, I became to be עמליה.
כן, נכון, הוא עמליה, אז מה את רוצה?
I run away from the north.
Dalit, hi. Hi.
תודה.
בבקשה, רק פרט קטן, יש אישור שאני לא יכול לקבל בהקלטה ביוטיוב, זה עכשיו, זה מקליט בזום, אבל ביוטיוב יש אישור טלפוני שכנראה מגיע ליאקי.
אוקיי, והוא בהודו.
כן, אז...
Okay, so it will be okay if there is just a recording in the Zoom, I will take it down after.
Okay.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
It's my pleasure. Honor.
Can you tell the group where are you going? They don't know.
את נראית נגד.
Who, me? Dalit, who are you speaking to?
No, I speak to Edward.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Tell the group where is going on.
Yeah, we're Inat and I, we are to go to Japan for a year. I will start in September, and Inat will join me in October. We'll be in Kyoto for a year, so. And, well, traveling around probably, yeah.
I will come to visit you.
That will be great. Yeah, surely.
I plan to go to Japan in 2025.
Okay, so let me, upload my email, and anyone's coming to Japan is welcome. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
if someone can help Edward, Edward is going to do something very important on his study. Edward, do you want to explain a little bit until Geshe will join us?
Yes, I'm a microbiologist, microbial ecologist, so I work with looking at behaviors of microbes in natural environments and under specified conditions. There's always evolution in the background. So what I think is really interesting and could contribute both to looking at biology in another way, and also
Edouard,
yeah, oh, sorry, then okay,
maybe
so,
we can stay after the session for those
yes,
who are interested. Thank you.
yes, okay, yeah, so sorry, yeah, Geshe, hello.
Hello.
Well, we're as always so glad to see you and to get your teachings, and I would just take the opportunity for a second to remind everyone here that that Dana for the Dharma Friends of Israel, and it's on the chat, and I will now turn you into I'll make you co-host, right?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Co-host, make co-host. You
Okay.
should be able now to be co-host.
Yep. All right. Okay, so I'll display the prayers, or at least first the
Thank you.
picture of the Buddha, the image of the Buddha. And I've been thinking a lot about the structure of this class, so I'm trying to make some changes. And one change is the beginning meditation will be a little shorter. So far we've had 8 minutes. We've come down from 12. So let's shorten it a little bit. We've done it so many times. Maybe about 5 minutes. Let's see. All right. So we start with breathing meditation. And visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of you as inseparable from your Lama, as inseparable from Nāgārjuna. And visualize that you're surrounded by all sentient beings. And then by remembering how close we really are to sentient beings in terms of what we all have in common, generate affectionate love. A sense of fondness, closeness, and deep concern for all sentient beings. Seeing them as a part of yourself. Finding them endearing and lovable. And that affectionate love then gives way to great compassion, that sincerely wishes for all sentient beings to be free from all sufferings and their causes, and wishes to contribute to that in the form of the aspiration to protect sentient beings, help them to overcome suffering and its causes. And that aspiration then grows stronger. And turns into the altruistic attitude. Not just aspiring, but determined to do all we can to assist sentient beings in the process of overcoming suffering and its causes. And since that is only possible really once we've become enlightened, removed our own limitations, our own sufferings, let's generate the mind of enlightenment based on great compassion, the altruistic attitude, and so forth. Thinking, may I become fully enlightened for the benefit of each and every sentient being. Which is also the motivating force for continuing to study the Precious Garland. So let's recite the prayers without losing our aspiration. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay. All right. So, wait, let me just quickly talk to you. Okay. Well, as I said, I've been thinking about this class. I've been thinking about the material I prepare. I've asked for feedback. Well, about this first meditation, we used to do about 12 minutes. Now, then it came down to about 8. Today was, around 5 minutes. Of course, if you feel like you want to do it more, I mean, any feedback is welcome at any time. So if someone or most of you feel we should do more of a initial meditation, we can absolutely do that. But if not, then we'll continue this way. Also about the material, I've asked 3 people to give me a feedback, and because I felt maybe it was getting too long, but then again, well, too long is not so much of a problem. We could always jump. But all 3 suggested to put a summary at the end of each section. So the sections would be after each verse to put a summary for everyone to get kind of the gist of what we've just gone through. So I'll try that with verse number 3. And again, any suggestion, very welcome, because we have only little time, so I want to use it as much as possible. All right, having said that, it's time for the Namrim, death. Okay, let me just look for the Namrim. Where is it? Namrim, here we go. Okay, so today we start with the actual way to become mindful of death, or the actual meditation. And you're probably all aware of the 9-point death meditation, one of the most powerful meditations there are. In Buddhism, in Buddhist, well, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in particular, there is an interesting way of talking about death. It's not so much described as, well, it's described as death. Yeah, they talk about death, but they also have this symbolic representation of death, which is the Lord of Death. Sometimes the Lord of Death is described as like Yama, the kind of main being in the hell realm, the kind of overlooking kind of guard, hell guard or whatever. But in general, it's seen as symbolic. And it's quite interesting because this particular being is seen as a spiritual guide. So it actually means death, of course. It's not really a being, but it's easier for us, or in some maybe cultural context also, it's helped Tibetans to think of death as a being. So first of all, it's a spiritual teacher, which makes sense here in terms of the first 3 aspects. Death is inevitable. Nothing can prevent. So death is inevitable as like this overall kind of topic here. And then to reflect on the fact nothing can prevent that we eventually die, that our life is getting shorter by each second, and we will die even if we had no time to practice the Dharma. There's no extension if for some reason we couldn't practice, we didn't have the time, or we didn't feel like it. So the conclusion, we must practice the Dharma. So death, therefore, is seen as a spiritual guide, like reminding us we have to practice. And an impartial guide, an impartial spiritual guide, in the sense like whether you're a king, you're a pauper, you're famous or not, death is going to come equally to everyone, to some earlier, to some later. And also the power, of course, the power of this particular being. Anyway, just if you're interested, or if you've heard of the Lord of Death, yeah, so Shinje in Tibetan, that's, well, the symbolic, it's really the symbolic representation in terms of, well, death itself. And to take some time, of course, to reflect on that death is certain. And I guess at this day and age, what's interesting is that we really have this concept of planning ahead. Of course, we pay into a pension fund. We have all sorts of insurances. I don't know, we build houses so that when we grow older, you know, I don't know, the toilets nowadays in Germany, that's what people do. It's like once you need a wheelchair, maybe at an old age, you'll still be able to get into your bathroom and so forth. So we're really good at thinking ahead of what can happen, but we don't really think ahead of death. So death is the only thing that is certain. Whether will be old age, we'll reach old age, there's no certainty of that. So to plan ahead, of course, it's good to plan ahead the way I just described it, but even more importantly, of course, is to plan ahead when it comes to our own death, to reflect on that again and again. And it's one of the most powerful Buddhist meditations, really. That's why the Lord of Death is seen as such an impartial and powerful spiritual teacher. So nothing can prevent the fact that one day we're going to die. And it's maybe good to have an hourglass or something, to have an hourglass that reflects our life. And let's say it runs for 100 years. And with every year, you see the sand is running through. You know, like a sand glass where the sand runs through. So that's the second point. Our lifespan can't be extended when it's time for us to die. And with each passing moment, we approach death. So each second, 1 second closer. So it's kind of like if you had this hourglass with it kind of running through, and every day there's a little less, a little less. If you had a way to weigh the sand that's left over, you see every day a little less sand, a little less sand. I don't know how many kilos it is at this point now, but tomorrow a few grams less and so forth. So a good reminder, actually, or a countdown, like I don't know, an app. So with your life expectancy, it doesn't get, I mean, let's say 100, 110, it doesn't get longer than that. So just that, the seconds running down every day, less, less, less. I guess that's also a good reminder how we're moving closer to death. And of course, the fact that all that's really beneficial when we die is our Dharma practice. And so to remember that, well, whether we practice or not, we're going to pass on when the time has come. So in that way, reflect on these 3 points again and again. Okay, so that's enough for today. And it's good because, well, it fits with the material we're going through right now, because we've been talking about high rebirth, liberation. So very much a preparation for the future. And of course, before we can prepare for that, first we have to face our own death. All right. Okay.
Also, it fits with the situation in Israel.
Yes, that's true. That's true. It fits with the situation in Israel. Yeah, that's true. But of course, anywhere in the world, who knows? I feel really safe here, but I could be dead by tomorrow. So even without this situation, of course, that's the problem. There's just no security, no certainty. But yeah, you're right. Of course, it also fits with that. And I mean, of course, it's scary to face our own death, but it's going to come anyway. So might as well face it so that we don't feel scared and we're prepared in the appropriate way. Okay. Anyway, having talked about that, let's go back to the Precious Garland. I guess this is where we got to. So these 3 points as part of the words, and here I just literally translate the Tibetan expressions, so the words of the words of purpose and relationship. Again, so just briefly to remind you not to lose the oversight. I mean, not to lose what we've been talking about, lose sight of the different concepts we've discussed. So we've very much tried with these first 2 verses to connect with the author, which is so important because it brings this emotional kind of connection. So a lot of Dharma practice, I mean, all of Dharma practice, really, the purpose of it is to bring everything we do onto an emotional level. Positive emotional level, of course. Positive emotions such as inspiration, if you want to call that. Yeah, that's a type of emotion. Aspiration. So feeling inspired, feeling inspired by someone like Nāgārjuna, by the Buddha, of course, but by Nāgārjuna, who's often described as the second Buddha. And of course, we have the great lamas who teach us these texts in the place of Nāgārjuna. And as part of our practice, we may even see Nāgārjuna, our lama, and the Buddha as inseparable in terms of their qualities, well, depending on what level they're on. But just visualizing it, it helps to bring our mind into a state that feels inspired. And if we feel inspired, what happens is, instead of always focusing on the external, I can switch it off. Instead of always focusing on the external, that's what we usually do. Our life is spent on just focusing on material objects around us. We're so preoccupied with gaining pleasure from the sense objects. But this gives us the chance to move inwards, to turn inwards in the sense, let me just see all of you. I want to see all of you. Where are you? To turn inwards in the sense of, well, feeling inspired. Well, first of all, I talked about feeling inspired, generating that sense of, well, I can do the same. Inspiration, leading to aspiration also. So wanting to do exactly the same, feeling inspired by these great beings and understanding I can do that as well. I have everything to do so. There's something that Shmuel said. I was gonna mention it later, but it's actually, he asked a very, he asked a question, and I think it's a really important question. Might as well display it. I think in this context, it may be important to talk about it. Okay, just a sec. I display his question. It was actually from last time, but we didn't have enough time. Where is this question? Yeah, here it is. Okay. Can you see his question? Can you read it? Wait. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, why this always, okay. All right, so he says, in general, how can we be skeptical? There's this part in the text, if you've read ahead, you may have seen it, where I talk about the importance of questioning everything, being investigative, analyzing whatever you heard, whatever you've learned. So how can we be this, he says, when it comes to those qualities of an object of refuge that are completely beyond us, such as omniscience? So more specifically, then, he says, how can we distinguish between a true object of refuge with inconceivable positive qualities and a false object of refuge, which claims to have these inconceivable qualities? It's a good point. He's got a good point there. But it's not like we're totally disconnected to an omniscient being. It's not like you're trying to turn a carrot into an omniscient being. Right? If your mind were a carrot, I mean, for the lack of a better example, I mean, if your carrot was this, if your mind were this abstract, weird object, okay, that's different. You know, like you can't turn something that doesn't have any thoughts, like a stone or whatever, into an omniscient mind. So if this omniscient mind now, if this stone now would have to try and understand what it is to become omniscient, that's impossible. But you have a mind, all of us, we all have a mind that has the ability of a Buddha already there. It's not like it's totally disconnected. We have everything to be a Buddha. Now, to give an analogy that Geshe Pesang has given, and many of the analogies I give, many of the explanations I give are based on his incredible teaching. So Geshe Pesang, what he once said, and many of you have heard it, he said that we have everything right now. That's why we say it's Buddha nature. We have Buddha nature. That is like when you say, but so it's not saying we are already a Buddha, but we have all the ingredients to become a Buddha. That is like when you go to a restaurant and they say we have Israeli salad, or when you live in McLeodganj, there's Israeli salad here as well. So Israeli salad, or we have tukpa. Now, usually in the case of tukpa, it's not ready there yet. Well, you wouldn't go to a restaurant where the noodle soup is already made and is sitting there for hours. No, it's freshly prepared. So are they lying when it says on the menu we have noodle soup? No, they're not lying. They're saying we have everything needed to give you a noodle soup. All the ingredients are there. Therefore, we have noodle soup. So in the same way, we have everything to become a Buddha. We have this innate wisdom, this innate love, this innate compassion. They just can't come to the forefront because of our obstructions. That's the only reason. Because of the obscurations that I've mentioned before, afflictive and cognitive ones that are not in the nature of our mind, that are just temporary. Because they are there, therefore, these incredible qualities cannot come to the surface. However, we have this ability to question and to understand. And so although it's beyond us, at this point, yes, omniscience is totally beyond us, but it's not like we cannot get an understanding of it. And it's just an intellectual in the beginning, but it's not totally wrong. So in the sense that, first of all, we need time. That is really important. As part of Buddhist study, and here study, it's not just the academic kind of accumulation of knowledge. No, it's taking it deeper, understanding, and then internalizing that, contemplating on what we learned and meditating on it, of course, ideally. But even with the first step of studying and then reflecting on, contemplating what we've learned, it's a slow process. It takes time, but you'll notice that over time, your understanding deepens. It makes more and more sense. It makes more and more sense. So, for instance, here, when you talk about a true object of refuge with inconceivable qualities, well, there are two possibilities. For instance, the Buddha. No, two possibilities in terms of a person. So talking about a person, yeah, because you said claims to have inconceivable qualities. So it seems to imply a person. Now, because the Dharma, you could also say the Dharma as an object of refuge, but let's say a person. Either it's the Buddha or usually a living Lama, a living master. Now with the Buddha, well, we just need to go back to the Buddha's life story and the things he said and so forth. So is this person reliable? Did the Buddha live? Was he a living example of the teachings and so forth? And I guess we can come to some kind of conclusion. Now, when it comes to a living master, we should analyze the master. I mean, we have in the modern 21st century, we're in such a rush. Of course, on one hand, Buddhism stresses a lot this, well, the urgency of practicing, the urgency of not wasting time and so forth. But that is in a place when we're complacent. That's for times when we're complacent, when we're lazy and so forth. That's when we're urged on. So don't be lazy, be on top of it. But to jump the order, if we start wanting to jump the order, want it quick as possible, I want to find a master right away, take full refuge in this person, well, then we run the danger that this person is not a qualified master. But we need to analyze, therefore. We need to take time. We don't need to jump right into it. Listen to their teachings, watch them. How do they behave? I mean, nowadays with social media, it's pretty easy to find out how these masters live. It's not like they live up in a cave and they have no internet or no way to connect to them. There's so many ways to find out from other students and so forth who they are. Are they false objects of refuge, claim to have these inconceivable qualities? I mean, it's pretty much already, if someone claims they have these great qualities already, then you can pretty much tell that they're not that great person, right? Reminds me of a time Gengetsulo told us the story many times when he was our teacher at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics. I'm pointing this way because the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics is down there. Anyway, so at the IBD, he would tell us the story when he was a student at the IBD. At some point, I forget what country they were from, but some monk from a different Asian country came and they put this chair, they asked for all the monks to come together in the prayer hall. They had an announcement. And then they put this chair in the center of the room. And the monks sat down and said, "I'm a Buddha." And they were like, "Yeah, right. Sure sign he's not a Buddha." Right? Kind of sitting down, claiming he's a Buddha. So I guess like this humility and this sincere wish to benefit others, we start with that. Can we observe that? And we can observe that. I mean, it's, you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time, right? So at some point you can see, I mean, a Lama, the way they manifest, I mean, even if they're an enlightened Buddha, they manifest as an ordinary person. And come on, we have some experience with people. So in that way, it takes time. And it's very important to learn about the Dharma. Again, not just an accumulation of knowledge, but to always relate it back to your own experience. Does this make sense or not? Does that, what the person say, is that in accordance with my own experience? Does it fit? Is it logical? Does it make sense? So sooner or later, it makes more and more sense. Well, maybe not. For some people, they just don't have this connection to Buddhism. Well, then Buddhism is not the right kind of system for them, and they possibly need to look elsewhere. But if there's this connection, then I guarantee I mean, just from the little bit I know of over the few years I've done this, it grows stronger and stronger and stronger, and it makes more and more sense. And you see more and more how everything is connected, and how what the Buddha has said, it totally makes sense. So in this way, I think you don't need to worry. It's not like so totally beyond us. It's not something that we cannot connect to. Our mind has incredible abilities. Shmuel, does that help a little bit?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So no follow-up. No follow. No.
Well, I can have a follow-up, but I don't want to take too much of the time.
Okay, let's do it next time. If you have a follow-up, then just write
Sure,
it to
then
me.
I'll-
Think about
sure.
it. Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank-
right. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, great. Anyway, so returning to the text, as I mentioned before, so to connect to the Lama, to connect to Nāgārjuna, understand the homage for the benefit of Nāgārjuna, for our benefit, to touch us on a certain level that puts us in touch with our own mind, with our incredible abilities. So even though, of course, we won't be able to access it right away, but we can get a slight sense of what we're able to do. And so it grows from there. So the first two, the first verse pretty much kind of points us in that direction. With the second verse, the promise, of course, is made. Again, the great qualities of the author, they're highlighted, but just the fact that he doesn't make a promise easily, that great masters, they follow through what they say, but also connecting to us, making the promise to us. So we've already heard that. Just to understand that such a promise holds a certain weight. It's not done easily, but it also, the promise at the same time, here in this case, and also in the case of other texts, they convey other things as well. Well, they convey these words of purpose and relationship, which is just another way of saying they convey three main components: the subject matter of the text, then the immediate purpose. So what does Nāgārjuna intend us to do with this material? What is the immediate purpose? And then the ultimate purpose. Now, they're not very difficult, these three. What's maybe a little difficult is the relationship, but not even that is difficult. It's pretty straightforward. So I don't think we need to spend that much time with it, but let's just go briefly through them. So what is in these first lines? And once we look at the two lines again, the promise to compose the text at the very end, when I kind of summarize the verse, the way I did it before, with like the highlighted or the letters of the words of the verse itself being in bold letters, and then in between the explanation, it'll become more obvious then how these first two lines actually contain exactly this. But going to the subject matter. So what is the subject matter here? Well, there are actually two aspects to it: a causal and a resultant. So the subject matter is explained from the point of view of causes and a result. In some of the translations and some of the explanations, they literally translate the Tibetan when it literally says cause and result of higher rebirth and the highest good. I don't think that's a good translation, because it sounds like not just the causes of, well, higher rebirth and liberation and enlightenment, but also the results of those. But it's not talking about the results of higher rebirth and the results of liberation and Buddhahood. Rather, what it does is it talks about the causes. How do you get a higher rebirth? How do you get how do you achieve the highest good? And these are the results. They are the results themselves. So it's not the causes and the effects of higher rebirth and the highest good, but it's causes and effects with regard to those two higher rebirths. So higher rebirth and the highest good are the result, And then we need to know what are the causes that take us there. Anyway, so as it says, this Precious Garland explores two aspects. So it explains two aspects of the Dharma. One is a causal and one is a resultant aspect. So the resultant, I explain that first because it's easier. It encompasses the two key objectives of Buddhist practice. Okay, so what is the goal of Buddhist practice? I mean, if it wasn't so difficult for us in the West to accept past and future lives, that would be easy. If we really had a strong conviction, life goes on, then of course we talk about higher rebirth and highest good, because this life is insignificant in comparison to what is to come, which doesn't mean we should neglect ourselves, which doesn't mean we shouldn't look after ourselves, none of this, but we should also look beyond this life. What lies ahead? I mean, how many years do we have left? Realistically, 30, 40, even if it's 50, 50 is nothing. I mean, if you just look at historical accounts going back like thousands of years, 50 years feels like nothing, right? So it's such a short time that we have left, and we should live it in a good way. And no one is saying we should neglect, like I said, our well-being, our happiness. The good thing really, if we look ahead, if we practice, if we prepare, we practice the causes for higher rebirth and the highest good, we'll have a really happy life right now. That's the side effect. If we work towards like looking beyond our death and prepare beyond that time, to prepare the time that comes after our death, then our life now will be so much happier and so much more meaningful. It's just a side effect, a positive side effect of preparing for the future. Anyway, so therefore, if we believe in future lives, and not just believe in it, but believing it is one thing, but really getting a feeling for this, like, I don't know, when is my next life going to start? Maybe next week. Maybe next week is my next life, because I may die next week. So my next life will start next week. I better get ready, because I don't know. So when I say we should get, we need to get to this level on we need to get to this understanding on an emotional level. It shouldn't just be, yeah, right, it kind of makes sense. Okay, what's next? No, it should really deeply affect us, as I said, on a deeper emotional level. That is so important, because otherwise we're not going to be moved to acting accordingly. We're not. We're just going to be preoccupied with the 8 worldly dharmas until the time we breathe our last breath. Therefore, to make a difference, to make it now. I mean, when is a better time than to start now? Maybe you already started. Great. But in case not, well, then to really think sincerely, this lies ahead. Wait, where are you? This lies ahead. So this is not make-believe. I mean, of course, maybe our old age lies ahead. Maybe, we don't know whether we live to become old. But what definitely lies ahead is the future. Again, a little bit difficult. This is not the time to talk about future lives and so forth. I personally have not a single doubt from everything I learned, not having a future life doesn't make any sense. For our consciousness not to continue on, well, if that wasn't the case, then we couldn't have the mind we have right now. It just doesn't work. Just the nature of our mind right now. So one thing we can do is to watch our mind more closely, to get a sense of this continuation of how one moment gives rise to the next, gives rise to the next, gives rise to the next, that there is no break in that throughout our entire life. Why should this stop when we die? How could our mind start in this life? The first moment of awareness as this person in this life, that was preceded by what? By something physical? It doesn't make sense. But again, this is not the time to discuss this. But if you have a sense of future lives, well, it's very, very important to get a sense that, well, there's higher rebirth, there's liberation and enlightenment. Those two are really worth aiming for. Because otherwise, well, more of this mess in samsara, who wants this? Okay, anyway, going back to the text. All right, so higher rebirth, rebirth in the human or celestial realm, which of course we know are most conducive to Buddhist practice. Why? Because the favorable conditions that they provide us for spiritual development. And even though human life is so messy, yes, it's messy. I mean, there are so many problems in this world. It doesn't end. If one problem is solved, we can be certain a new one arrives. I mean, in Israel, you definitely know about that, but that's not just true in Israel. It's true everywhere. You know, I don't know, sour rain, we got rid of that in the 80s, 90s. Now we have global warming. And then if that gets solved, if we survive it, then there'll be something else. But let's, of course, remember, it's a good mixture, as Venerable Lobsang said last time. It's a good mixture of suffering that actually can help our practice. So higher rebirth, human or celestial. The highest good, well, liberation and Buddhahood. Let's get rid of all this stuff on our mind that's not part of our mind, that obscures our real nature. And what are the causal aspects? Well, they are the Buddhist practices. All the Buddhist practices and their methods, they are subsumed. They belong to these two, the causes of higher rebirth and the causes of highest good. Any Buddhist practice, so when we talk about the Dharma, what is the Dharma? I've said it later on. It's not just a set of intellectual concepts. No, it's a collection of methods. These are all methods that serve as causes to result as causes for higher rebirth and for the highest good. So in particular for higher rebirth, it's ethical and virtuous actions, such as the 10 virtues, to not harm others, to not harm ourselves and others. And again, if we live a life according to that, of course, it's a cause for our future. We prepare well for the future. But even in this life, we'll be much happier, calmer, relaxed, satisfied. And then, of course, the causes of the highest good. For instance, renunciation. Renunciation is not about giving away all your stuff. That's not renunciation at all. That's just, I don't know, decluttering, whatever you want to call that. No, renunciation is just the wish to overcome our limited existence in the form of our samsaric mind, samsaric body, and the causes that give rise to them. For that, you don't have to live in an empty space. Anyway, then of course the wisdom realizing emptiness, very important, bodhicitta, and so on. Now this is the subject matter. It's all what lies in the future, what we should work towards. If we want to be happy, if we don't want to be happy, well, don't do it. If you don't want to be happy, don't do it. But if you want to find the happiness and satisfaction that we instinctively look for, intuitively look for all the time, well, that's those causes. These causes are the causes, or these are the methods. Well, causes in the sense there are some methods to reaching these higher states. But that being the subject matter, now what's the immediate purpose? Gyaltsab actually only mentions the first one. Then some commentators, they mentioned the second one. So I mentioned both in here. I put in both. So what is the immediate purpose? What does Nāgārjuna say? He's basically telling us, if you study this text, that's what I want you to do right now. Okay, so liberation and enlightenment lie in the future. That should be our ultimate purpose. But for the time being, what we can do right here and right now is the following. So for us, the reader, to understand the meaning of higher rebirth, what does it really mean? What does it entail? And that's what the whole text is going to be about. What is the highest good? And what are the causes, most importantly? So the respective causes. What are the causes and conditions? What is it we need to train? What are the methods? What do we need to be careful about? It's basically an instruction how to live our lives. So through diligent study and reflection upon the content of this text. That's the first purpose. That's the first thing we need to do. The second is to meditate on, practice and train. Now, when we say meditate, the English word meditate it does encompass what the Tibetan word mean, means, but it's sometimes not understood. To meditate, we have a sense to meditate means to sit there and to think about something, right? To say, meditate on compassion, for instance. We kind of get a sense, oh, let's think about compassion. But there are actually two types of meditation, and many of you are aware of that. One type is the one I just described, where that which you meditate on becomes the object of the mind, and it's that which you reflect on. So, for instance, love. Oh, love is good. Love is positive. Love is something worthwhile. It's something I should, in that way, I can reflect on love. But another way to meditate on love is to practice and train in it, in the sense that you generate love. The mind doesn't focus on love, but the mind becomes love. So you generate love in your continuum, in the meditation. So previously, before I meditated, no love, right? I was too busy being angry with my neighbor or with the dog or whatever that's barking outside. So now I meditate on love in the sense that I generate love in my own continuum. And in the text, those two are described. So meditation as meditating on an object, and meditating by way of generating that which you meditate on in your own continuum. So here I wrote meditate on, which here means practicing and training in. So not just reflecting on it, but really generating these states of mind that are associated, that are the causes of higher rebirth, as taught in the text. So to practice virtue, not just to reflect on the positive aspects of virtue, but to generate these virtuous minds ourselves, in order then to attain rebirth in the human or celestial realms. So what does Nāgārjuna say? What does he want us to do? First, understand the text, study the subject matter, really understand it in such a way that it's not just an intellectual understanding, but it goes much deeper. We reflect on it, applying logic, applying our own experience, and in that way contemplating it to such a degree that we deeply understand it. And then when it comes to the causes for higher rebirth, we make sure that we already practice these causes in order to then be reborn as a human or a celestial being in the future. Of course, all with the purpose. What's the purpose of this? The ultimate purpose is for the reader, for us to attain the highest good in liberation and enlightenment, to see that as a goal. I mean, I don't know whether that is your goal, and no one is going to force you to see that as your goal, to make it your goal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be happy and wanting to be satisfied in this life. In fact, you can't practice the Dharma if you don't have a certain well-being in this life, a certain sense of satisfaction, getting satisfaction just from our study, contemplation, and meditation. We couldn't even do it. So no one is saying ignore that. But on top of making that our goal, also make everything else your goal. And they support each other. If you make liberation and enlightenment your ultimate goal, and in the beginning, like Shmuel says, yeah, this is pretty much beyond ourselves. It's really difficult to grasp. Of course it is, but we can learn more about it. We can get a better sense. And if we really understand that and understand that it's possible, and really understand, even if it's an intellectual understanding, well, if it's just an intellectual understanding, still there's a sense, I want this. I mean, if we think of something in this life, in the future, I want to be, I don't know, rich and famous, that's also an intellectual understanding. We can still work towards it, even though we have no experience of it. So likewise, with this intellectual understanding we have of liberation and enlightenment, we can work towards it, even if it's initially only an intellectual understanding. But of course, it can be deepened through our practice. Anyway, so the ultimate purpose, that's what basically Nāgārjuna tells us, to not lose sight of that. We can all do it. We have this mind that's totally prepared. And of course, not just for our own benefit, especially when we say enlightenment, it is also for the benefit of so many other sentient beings. Okay, so having said all this, subject matter, that's what Nāgārjuna taught. Why did he teach it? Because right away we need to do something with it. That is clarified in the immediate purpose. But then, of course, there's the ultimate purpose we shouldn't lose sight of, and that is liberation and enlightenment. Now, how do these three components, how do they connect? What is their relationship? What depends on what? Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. You always start with the end. So the ultimate purpose, which of course we've heard, it's enlightenment, Buddhahood, the ultimate goal, that relates to and depends on. So it relates to, or you can say relates to or depends on, it's the same. They have the same meaning. So to relate to something means to depend on something. The immediate purpose. So in other words, yeah, without the ultimate purpose, enlightenment and liberation, they wouldn't be possible unless we understood the concept of higher rebirth, the highest good in their respective causes. If we didn't understand it, and if we didn't first attain higher rebirth. Okay, we have already one high rebirth now, but some of us, some of you may reach one of these goals this lifetime, but let's say it's a little unlikely. So we probably take more than this life. So then what do we need to do? We need to first attain further higher rebirth. And in order to do that, we need to know the subject matter. So, or there must be the subject matter, must be somewhere expressed, and it's set forth in the Precious Garland, right? So, therefore, in short, Nāgārjuna, why does he talk about these subjects, higher rebirth and so forth? Well, because we should then study and reflect on these causes or methods by which we can attain, well, higher rebirth, and then, of course, later on, the highest good. So, because studying this will give us the knowledge we need to practice, of course, to then eventually attain liberation and enlightenment, which is the ultimate purpose. So, first the subject matter, we learn about it in order to then actually actualize the subject matter, which are higher rebirth and, of course, liberation and enlightenment. Attaining liberation and enlightenment is based on, it's dependent on understanding the causes of higher rebirth and the highest good. And this understanding comes from studying and reflecting on the subject matter of the Precious Garland. So I hope this is clear. This is like a kind of a looser, yeah, hopefully not so abstract, less abstract kind of way of describing the relationship, but maybe this helps. Later on, I'll at the very end of the second verse, I'll add a summary, but I haven't had time to do that yet. But anyway, so I'll also continue with these illustrations. So to summarize, basically you have the subject matter, which is higher rebirth, the highest good in their respective causes. You have the immediate purpose, you have the ultimate purpose. So in these squared kind of illustration, these squared boxes, you have the subject matter, the immediate purpose, the ultimate purpose described. And I put these arrows, right? So because, well, first you have the subject matter, you need to have that in order to then understand it. And understanding that, then you can attain the highest good and the higher rebirth, or the highest, no, sorry, a higher rebirth and the highest good. Oh, no, that's not the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose, yeah, is the highest good. So liberation and Buddhahood. So liberation and Buddhahood is the ultimate purpose. So the subject matter leads to the immediate purpose leads to the ultimate purpose. But then the ultimate purpose is only possible if you had first the immediate purpose, and the immediate purpose is only possible once you reach, if you have the subject matter. Okay. So yeah, I hope this is clear. I mean, it's really not that difficult. It's just saying the first one leads to the second leads to the third. And because they have this kind of causal relationship, therefore, the third depends on the second and the second depends on the first. Okay, yeah, so I hope this is clear. Anyway, so that's these three, and it's really not that hard. And it's always, like whichever text you study, the relationship is always the same. Always the subject matter is mentioned first, then the immediate purpose, and then the ultimate purpose. Yeah, so if you know one of these, if you know this particular, in this case, you know this, then you know the other text as well. All right, so that's enough with this. And again, at the end of today, I will summarize what I've just said so far, but I want to also continue with something else now. We're still with the 2 lines of the purpose. Okay, not purpose, sorry, the promise. Okay, not to lose sight of it. Let me just, here. So, we're still, O king, I will explain to you the fully virtuous Dharma so that you may give rise to the Dharma within yourself. So the words, they themselves express a promise. I will explain to you, that's the promise. But as we've just heard, and that's not immediately clear from the words yet, in those words, implied in those words, are also these 3 components. Subject matter, immediate purpose, and ultimate purpose. But now, why here says, O king. So I took the opportunity to say a little bit about in Tibetan, Chiduchawaducha. Chiduchawaducha is kind of like the intended disciple. Every text has like an intended disciple usually, like someone for whom this text, or to who this text was directed, or for whose purpose it was mainly composed. In this case, this is the king, obviously. So when we study, for instance, Parchin, when we study the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, there's a lot of discussion. Who is the intended disciple of these sutras? What are their needs? What are their... And it becomes so kind of obvious from the style of teaching. So what is the style? And it'll become obvious that this was taught to a king by some of the words. But of course, it was not just intended. The main disciple, yes, being the king, but it was also intended for us. So let's analyze this a little bit. Okay, the 2 lines of the promise to compose the text begin with the words, O king. Okay, indicating that Nāgārjuna is addressing the king directly while speaking indirectly to us and other followers of the Buddha. So to us anyway, but also other followers of the Buddha. The other followers, it'll become clearer later on. There are certain verses that are very specifically directed at the followers of some philosophical systems. So followers of the Chittamatra, for instance. Okay. Anyway, that comes later. But the main person is the king. Now, the fact that the Precious Garland was directly addressed to a king had important benefits. You know, like when people come to the Dharma, or new to the Dharma. So for instance, when they observe His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And then they see His Holiness spend time with, for instance, famous people, Richard Gere. I remember someone saying to me, oh, His Holiness likes to rub shoulders with the famous, with the rich and famous, not understanding why His Holiness was doing this. But maybe from this paragraph, it becomes a little clearer. I'm not saying Richard Gere is a king, but let's read this. So the fact that the Precious Garland was directly addressed to a king had important benefits. By directly teaching a king who may have wielded great power and influence, and demonstrating the value of Buddhist principles for good governance, ethical behavior, and social harmony, because it's all included in this text, Nāgārjuna could influence not only the king's personal actions, but also the policies and practices of the entire kingdom, thus benefiting many people. His teachings are likely to have secured royal patronage for the Buddhist community, providing crucial support for the survival and flourishing of the Dharma, including resources and protection. So basically, it had an incredible benefit. A king, like a person such as the king, was very influential. And of course, then the subjects of the king, they were indirectly also taught many of these virtuous practices, how to be a virtuous person, benefiting others, compassion, and so forth. So in that way, of course, it had this rippling effect, a positive effect on so many others. Plus, of course, also it guaranteed that the king looked after the Buddhist community, which was important at the time of Nāgārjuna, of course, there was no country such as India, democracy as it exists nowadays. It consisted of many different kingdoms. And if a king was not in favor of Buddhism, well, it's subject, well, depending on the degree of tolerance or not, well, yeah, people were probably possibly not able to practice the Dharma. So it was extremely important to have a king. Now, in the same sense, if His Holiness the Dalai Lama spends time with, I don't know, politicians and so forth, well, of course, it makes sense in terms of the Tibetan issue. It was always important, and it has always been important because the Tibet issue needs the support of politicians. But what is really interesting, for instance, with Richard Gere, I mean, the incredible influence Richard Gere has. I remember I was looking once for a YouTube video, and as far as I know, Richard Gere hasn't formally studied the Dharma to the extent as probably many of you have studied. I don't know, right? I don't think he has done any formal studies, but he gives talks on Buddhism, and millions, you can see how many people are listening. It's like, wow, you know, if Richard Gere gives a Dharma talk, so amazing. If someone has that kind of, I mean, it's just the way the world works. If someone has name and fame and they talk about the Dharma, I mean, I don't know if now, like think if Donald Trump became a Buddhist now, I would want him to win the election. Yeah, right? A practitioner of the universal vehicle, love, compassion. Oh, please vote for him by all means, right? I mean, the way he influences everything and tries to put his hands. So great, it would be great. Or, you know, who's the most famous person in the world right now? Elon Musk. What's his name? Elon Musk? He's pretty famous, right? I mean, for whatever reason. So if he became a Buddhist, wow.
I think Taylor Swift, Geshe.
Pardon? Taylor Swift. Oh yeah, right. Didn't they say something about the way her view on politics is going to influence the American? Yeah, good point. Taylor Swift. Oh, let's make her Buddhist. I mean, there'd be thousands of people, and they just benefit from it. It's not about, wow, the Buddhist club is going to enhance, we get more discounts or whatever. No, it's not about that at all. It's beneficial. I mean, in my case, it's given me so much. So of course it depends on the person, their predisposition and everything, but potentially it could benefit a lot of people. And so it makes sense that the Buddha taught this king. I don't think that was his only reason. The real reason is given a little later. But anyway, I wanted to stress that if we see some of the lamas, you know, rubbing shoulders, to say it in the kind of slightly derogatory way, but hey, rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous, it's not, they don't care. It's just because it benefits more people. But there's more to it. Moreover, since the king was a lay person with considerable worldly responsibilities, Nāgārjuna demonstrates that the Dharma is not just for monks and nuns. It can be practiced and applied by anyone, regardless of social status or occupation. Nowadays, we all live like kings. Think about it. Nowadays, our life in the West. I think our life in the West is probably more comfortable than the life of a king at the time of Nāgārjuna. I don't want to know what the toilet was like, you know. Did they have, I don't know, water pipes? I don't think so, you know, like the life of a king was definitely still, you know, they had to undergo hardships, the heat in the summer, there was no AC, there was someone kind of fanning them, you know, but then they were getting hot from the other side. And then when cold winter, they had a fire in front, but nothing in the, you know, it was hard. Nowadays, we live like kings and queens. I mean, we have all these, we don't have servants, but we have coffee machines, we have cars that take us from here and there, we have phones, we have all these gadgets. I mean, they're much more reliable than servants, you know, that can get sick or just take off. So in a way, we live like kings. We have a lot of responsibilities. We have to pay the bills. We have to pay for the insurance. I mean, life has become really complicated. With all the comfort we have, there's a lot of work we have to do. A lot of, you know, we can't just say, oh, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to stay for a week and 2 or 3 weeks and don't do anything. Maybe you can do that much, but sooner or later we have to, I don't know, fill out forms, I don't know, apply for this, apply for that, pay this bill. So we have a lot of worldly responsibilities. So there's the first of all, the luxury we live in. There's the worldly responsibilities. So Nāgārjuna therefore demonstrates that the Dharma is not just for monks and nuns. It can be practiced and applied by anyone, regardless of social status or occupation. So maybe some of our work may have a great influence on the world. I mean, now with social media and so forth, some of the social influence, I mean, I think they have more influence than a king had at the time. I mean, how many subjects did a king in India have? A few hundred thousands? I don't think India had that many. What did I hear? I think in 1940, around that time, India had about how many million citizens? Like 350 million or something? It's not that much. Now it's tripled, quadrupled. I mean, it's so many more. So if you think like more than 1,000 years ago, I mean, there were a few million people living in India. And so these kingdoms had very few subjects. So their influence was minor. Think about nowadays. So the Buddha is therefore basically telling us we're like this king. It doesn't matter who we are. Everyone can practice, no excuses. So I thought that was interesting. Okay. So in this way, owing to its broad-ranging relevance, so really this text is so relevant. So many subjects are addressed in here. It gives practical advice, philosophical depth. So we're going to go into, well, explanations on emptiness from the point of view of the Prasangika school, for instance. So it goes into a lot of depth. Versatility, it's very versatile. It's applicable in so many different situations. And of course, it provides spiritual guidance. So in that way, the Precious Garland endures as a timeless text. So saying, "O King," all this is in a way applied to this because, well, not just O King, of course, also later on the explanations, they're given, of course, in a particular context, but we can take them out of this context and they can be still applied to the modern world. Its resonance transcends time and culture, offering valuable insights for personal growth, a more fulfilling life, and spiritual transformation, remaining as relevant to us today as it was nearly 2 millennia ago. Okay. I hope I didn't go too fast. If I do, you can always say so. Anyway, so again, just to briefly summarize, maybe we have some time to go a little bit further, but just in time, in case we haven't, I summarize already now. Okay, so what I mentioned today was basically reminding us again of briefly the verse of homage, just to connect to Nāgārjuna for the reasons we've discussed before. And right now we're basically discussing the verse of promise to compose the text, and again to emphasize the commitment of the author, the pivotal role, this important role the author plays. So making this promise, but also what we've discussed is that these first two lines of the second verse, they emphasize, of course, or they imply 3 components of the text. So the words of the purpose and relationship, or in other words, the subject matter, the immediate purpose, and the ultimate purpose. And what we've hopefully learned is that we need to go beyond just thinking of this life. It's ridiculous doing that because it's so short in comparison to what lies ahead. So at least to consider the possibility. Consider the possibility in the sense of allowing that. Maybe, I mean, just even doubt in that direction is extremely helpful. And then apply the causes, practice the causes. And of course, the wonderful benefit of doing so is that it benefits us right now, that it will make our lives more calm, more relaxed, more meaningful, there's less anxiety and so forth. If we really practice these causes that are specifically, well, explained as causes for higher rebirth, and then those that are specifically taught for liberation and enlightenment, well, as I said, even in this life, we'll be so much happier. And as I've also said many times before, even if after this life there's nothing, let's say the Buddha just said it to, I don't know, because, you know, just whatever. It was not a definitive teaching, it was interpretative teaching. He just wanted for us to live our lives right now, making our lives now meaningful. Well, that's okay. It's a win-win situation. It doesn't matter, because we fully benefit from it in this life, and when we die, there's no regret. And then if there's nothing afterwards, okay. And if there's, I don't know, like in the Abrahamic faith, there's like being with God, or going to some kind of being reborn in some horrific place, well, we're probably going to be with God. Again, a win-win situation, whatever the outcome. But here now in this Buddhist context, yeah, so to take that into consideration, to allow this, act accordingly, but keep an open mind and constantly reflect and analyze, does it make sense or not? Still, we can still be very skeptical. We can still be investigating this, trying to find answers to our doubts and so forth, but at least allowing the possibility and practicing these causes as much as we can, because the outcome is totally worthwhile. I mean, it's totally worthwhile to do so because of the incredible outcome. All right. So anyway, having talked about this in a more abstract way, and then more specifically, we've heard there's, of course, the subject matter. We need to do something with it. That's the immediate purpose. What should we do with it? Well, try and understand it as much as we can. And of course, put into practice the causes for higher rebirth in order then to be well prepared for the ultimate purpose, liberation and enlightenment, which of course depends on liberation and enlightenment depends on our understanding of the subject matter, and our understanding of the subject matter depends on the text such as the Precious Garland to explain the subject matter. All right. So having understood that, also, in this case, a king is addressed, not a monk or a nun. Most Buddhist practitioners nowadays are lay people. So from that point of view, it's addressing, yeah, well, most of you who are lay people, not all of you are, but those of you who are not monks and nuns, well, even the king who is so busy. And nowadays we're also so busy. So just as a king is really, really busy with so many, and a king is so tempted, of course, very much tempted, so much attachment, and the ego is very much, I mean, a king's ego is up, you know, is constantly what's the word, reinforced. And that's the same nowadays, you know. That's like we live in a world where being self-centered is seen as almost a virtue. I mean, not being self-centered is seen as being stupid. Freier. No, maybe not in all cases, but yeah, in the sense of like, yeah, don't become a freier, don't become a sucker kind of idea, right? Okay, so in that way, there's so many similarities between us and a king, well, more than 1,000 years ago. And of course, it's important to understand that the king had incredible influence on that way. It, of course, benefited so many sentient beings. Now, our influence depends on how our presence on social media is, but we may even, if any of you is like a social, what do you call it, influencer? If any of you is an influencer, then you may also influence a lot of people with your, what's it called, social media presence. Okay, anyway, so I've summarized everything. Yeah, so there's no time to continue, but that's okay. Okay, anyway, so we're done before we do the meditation. And again, if you have any suggestions to change things, of course, in the end, the majority decides, but who knows, maybe other people feel the same way. So if you have any suggestions about the format, then please write to Dalit, and then she can pass it on to me, and I'll yeah, definitely take it into consideration. And depending on how many people want those changes, I'll make the changes. Great. Okay. And also about this material, if there's anything you want to, because I'm like, yeah, I'm just preparing this, and it's different. Of course, I read it to you, and with the classes now being able to see you, that really helps me to get a better sense of understanding or not. But I'm a little bit, I feel a little bit, not blindsided was the wrong word, but I still feel a little bit in the dark about the material. So I don't need any positive feedback, but negative ones, like any kind of suggestions how to change it. The summary, I'll definitely add that. And if there's anything further, please let me know. Great.
I have one suggestion, Geshe-ma.
Yes, please.
Which, maybe give us a question or two to think about to really so that I really understand the material. Because sometimes when I listen or when I read, I think I understand it, but then when I have a question, I'm like, oh, now I'm not so sure anymore. So
that's a good
I don't
idea.
know if that's easy for you, but that would be really helpful to really see if I understand. And then if I don't understand, then I can write to you and say,
Yeah. That's a good suggestion. Yeah, I used to do that when I taught the Pramanavartika. With each section, after each section, they had like a whole list of questions that I asked people to answer. So that's a good idea. If you want to, yeah, of course, no one is forced to answer them, but if you would like to, good. Yeah, I'll try. I'll try and
Thank you.
make the time. Yeah, great. Anything else? Any other suggestions? And if not now, of course, as I said, you can always write to delete. And if you don't want to give your name, that's fine too. I don't need to know who's asked it or who made the suggestions. You can remain anonymous, but it's still helpful. Yeah. Great. Okay. So let's start the meditation. And this, as always, we start with some breathing meditation to empty our full mind with all the concepts we just learned. So now, having covered the first verse and the first half of the second verse, we've been given the opportunity to connect with the author, to connect with Nāgārjuna, in the sense of generating gratitude and allowing ourselves to be inspired by his deep knowledge his insights. And his kindness to compose such a text. But also, especially with the words of promise, to compose the text Nāgārjuna taught us these 4 components: subject matter, the 2 types of purpose, and the relationship. Of these first three components. So Nāgārjuna tells us that there's a causal aspect of the subject matter, and a resultant aspect of the subject matter of this text. With the resultant aspect referring to the objective of Buddhist practice. Higher rebirth, and the highest good, which are liberation and Buddhahood. In other words, working towards actualizing our fullest potential. And for that, we need the causal subject matter, which are the causes or methods that, if applied, will result in higher rebirth, as well as liberation and enlightenment. So that is the content of the remaining verses, the Precious Garland. And with the second component, Nāgārjuna tells us what he wants us to do with the subject matter immediately. In the form of the immediate purpose. To learn about and to reflect on the two objectives, high rebirth and the highest good, and their causes. But not just to understand the subject matter, but also to work towards attaining high rebirth in the future. With this immediate purpose, of course, being the foundation, the stepping stones that lead us to the ultimate purpose. Eliminating afflictive obscurations or attaining liberation. And eliminating cognitive obscurations. That is attaining enlightenment. And then the fourth component, the relationship, indicates that the ultimate purpose depends on the immediate purpose. And the immediate purpose depends on the subject matter of the Precious Garland. In other words, to reach liberation and enlightenment, we need the content of Nāgārjuna's Precious Garland. And since Nāgārjuna taught the Precious Garland not merely to a monk or a nun, but to a king, who was a layperson, becomes clear that the Precious Garland can be practiced and applied by anyone. even living a life, a lot of luxury, and with a lot of worldly responsibilities. In fact, our present lives in the 21st century with all their distractions, being so busy with worldly responsibilities, temptations, incredible luxury. Even with such a life, we can all practice the content of the Precious Garland. In fact, utilize our present situation to gradually transform our mind. And now to conclude this analysis, let's focus on whatever insight we've gained, whatever emotion has arisen as a result of our analysis. And internalize it by single-pointedly focusing on it. And then let's dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated together today. Well, let's first of all dedicate it towards reaching this ultimate purpose, fulfilling this ultimate purpose. Not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. May we become fully enlightened to be able to lead all sentient beings to that state. And in the meantime, may whatever virtue we've accumulated cause our spiritual masters, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to have a very long and healthy life, so that they continue to guide us through their example and through their teachings. And may also the situation, in particular in Israel, greatly improve. May the hostages be released as soon as possible, and all the suffering on both sides subside. both sides realize how close they actually are. And how much they have in common. So let's recite the prayers with that in mind. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all good. All-powerful Jinrezi, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's it for today. Have a great week, and I see you again next Monday. All right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Geshe.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank you.
Geshe-ma.
Good night.
Thank you,
Bye.
DFI.
Monday.
Edward, what you doing? Edward, what you doing?
Yes.
So,
Okay. Oh, so should I go on with what I started with at the beginning? Yes. I'm going for a sabbatical in Japan, in Kyoto, and as I would like to spend this time as a start and then continue as I come back to examine evolution with the tools of dependent arising and Buddhist Buddhist views. And there are good reasons for doing that, because evolution is, once even scratching a bit of the surface, is perpetual change, depending on and resulting in, with causes and results just being, as we know, just labels. And if one gets into understanding, looking at mechanisms of evolutionary change, the same, in a way, parallel to what has been done with other scientific fields, such as quantum physics in Buddhism. I think that looking at evolution and life can also bring some very strong insights for practitioners on the one hand, and for non-practitioners on the other hand. So it's a big goal, of course, and I'm, first of all, I'm interested into trying to develop it for myself. But if I can have an effect on others, it's in any case the way that I teach my classes. I don't speak of Buddhism, but I bring the same those perspectives, and I think it could be it could be of benefit. So that's what I'm going to try to do.
okay, you need some help or something?
Well, I may any help is welcome, of course. Yeah, any help is welcome. I've been in contact with Geshe-ma. She already gave me some texts, additional texts that I can refer to, and people I can connect to, and Dalit also is giving me some names, and I will try to, and in Japan I will contact people, and of course I will try this year. I've never done that. Been in India only once for a short while, to also get to India and meet people there as well.
Wow.
It would be interesting to read the results in case you publish a paper or have some written something, or you can tell us about it. it would be interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the aims is eventually to write down something, to write something that may be published somewhere. Academic publication would be great, but even a non-academic publication that could be spread around would also be great. But it has to be worked on.
Yeah,
As
thank
Yaku
you.
would say, it has to be a work in progress.
Thank you for sharing. Excellent.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We hope we see you even from Japan.
I couldn't hear you, Vada.
I said that I hope we see you even from Japan.
Yeah, well, the hours will be a bit difficult, but if I cannot join directly, I will look at the YouTube. But yeah, of course, I keep in touch,
Okay.
of course. See you next week in any case. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Eduardo.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.